Hey, good afternoon. I'm Brian Manning. I'm a political asylum lawyer. Thanks for being with me here on the Asylum Answers Show. Hello on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. Glad that you're here with me. I'm going to answer your questions about getting asylum in the United States. That's what myself and my law firm do every single day. We help people from all over the country win asylum, both at the asylum office and in immigration court. So I want to answer questions today that you have about winning asylum in the United States. But first, I want to say a couple of words about something important. I had a consultation recently, and the person said to me, "Oh, hey, Brian, you know what? This other lawyer, I saw a YouTube video by this lawyer where they said that I could get asylum if I am from a country where people don't like Israel and they're upset with Israel over the war. And if I just act like I'm, or maybe I really am, pro-Israel, if I support Israel, then I can get asylum because the people in my country are against Israel, and if I'm for Israel, that this can help me get asylum. This can be a grounds for me to get asylum." And it was interesting because I actually happened to see that video in which the lawyer said this, and I was really surprised that the lawyer said this, and I was disappointed that I was speaking with someone who thought that that might be the case and was maybe ready to apply for asylum on this basis, because this person, it turns out, in my opinion, had virtually no chance of winning asylum. There was no facts that would give rise to a viable asylum claim. And the thing that this lawyer was saying in the video was, you know what, it's okay if you've been here in the United States for many years, because the recent outbreak of hostilities between Israel and Hamas will count as a changed circumstance. Remember, to get asylum, normally you have to apply during your first year in the United States, right? But there's a couple of categories of exceptions to the 1-year filing deadline that make it okay for you to apply even after 1 year in the United States. And one of them is called changed circumstances, where something changes such that maybe you didn't really need asylum in the past, but now, because of this thing that has changed, you're really at risk and you need asylum. And this lawyer was saying in the video, oh, well, this outbreak of hostilities is like a changed circumstance. And if you're from a country that is in the Middle East and is pretty much, most people are against Israel and they're mad at Israel, if you support Israel, then you can qualify for asylum. And also you'll get around the 1-year filing deadline because this is a changed circumstance. I think that it's extremely, extremely, extremely unlikely that you're going to get asylum just based on the fact that you support Israel. You see, to get asylum, you have to show that there's a good chance you're going to be persecuted, right? That something bad's going to happen to you. And there's kind of two ways to do that. One is where you have been basically put on a list. Let's say that someone has indicated that they want to hurt you, like they know about you and they've said, we're going to kill you or we're going to do something really bad to you. Like the feared persecutors, the bad guys, are aware of you and they are thinking, oh, when that person gets back here, we're going to go get him. Okay. So that's kind of one route. The other route is, you know what, maybe no one has ever harmed me, maybe no one's ever threatened me, but just fitting this certain profile puts me at risk. Just being this kind of person or having these certain characteristics puts me at risk. And of course, the characteristics have to be something that fits into one of the 5 protected grounds, right? Your race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. And the argument with this would be, oh, well, this is like a political opinion case because I'm pro-Israel and the people, or maybe my government, is anti-Israel and they view this as a political matter, or it could even be a religious case, but probably more likely political. And so that's my hook. That's my nexus to a protected ground. And that's what's going to allow me to get asylum. That's what the argument would be. But remember, if for most people are that are already in the United States have not taken some strong public stand against Israel and have had no problems in the past for being pro-Israel, and they're not on someone's list. No one back in Syria or Jordan or Iraq is thinking, oh, as soon as Ahmed gets back, we're going to get him because he's pro-Israel. That's not the case for most people, right? So then you'd be having to base your asylum claim on this idea that just fitting the profile of someone who is pro-Israel is enough to put you at risk because people in my home country that fit that profile are being persecuted on a vast, grand scale, okay? And to do that, you have to show reports that show that say that, hey, look, just being pro-Israel in this country is enough to get a person persecuted because look, they're getting hurt and harmed like crazy. People are going after them on a massive scale, such that it constitutes like a systematic persecution of this group of people that possess one of these 5 protected grounds. In this case, a political opinion that is pro-Israel. And that doesn't exist. As far as I know, there are not significant reports out there from credible resources saying that, look, just being viewed as pro-Israel is enough to get you in serious trouble in any of these countries. Perhaps those reports will come out. Perhaps it will happen. I hope it doesn't. But I mean, it could be the case that people who are pro-Israel start getting persecuted in other countries. And if non-governmental organizations and governments start detailing this persecution in news articles and in like human rights reports, and it looks like, oh wow, yeah, that's a thing, like just being pro-Israel is enough to seriously put you at risk, yeah, then maybe this kind of claim will work. But that's not how it is right now. So here's the bottom line. If you're thinking, oh, maybe what's going on in the Middle East now with Israel and Hamas, maybe that will help me get asylum. Maybe I'll qualify now for asylum because of that. Probably not. You should definitely not apply without talking this through in detail with an asylum lawyer. Okay. I recommend, if you've watched any of my stuff, you know that I recommend not just talking to an immigration lawyer who does all kinds of immigration, family-based, business-based, and all of this. I think you should work with a lawyer who focuses on asylum. Okay. Go to someone who specializes in and spends all of their time working on the kind of problem that you need solved. If you have a heart condition, you're not going to go to a brain surgeon for that, right? You're going to go to a cardiologist because that's what they do. That's what they've been specially trained in. That's where they spend all of their time. That's what they're reading and learning about, and they're immersed in cardiology, right? Well, so it is with immigration law. You want to go with the lawyer who focuses on the kind of immigration problem that you need solved. All right. So go to an asylum lawyer. All right. Oh man, this is the best. Badru says, hello, Mr. Bryant. That's my talk for today. Let me know what questions you have. Leave me your questions, comments in whatever you want to talk about in the comments. Badru on YouTube says, hey, Mr. Bryant, thanks for the great job you're doing. I'm living free in America now because of you. Thanks for the effort you had to put in to win my asylum case. You're the best. Very kind of you. I love when Badru gets on here and says nice things like this. Thank you, Badru, for taking the time to make this nice comment. Appreciate it. Truly an honor supporting you. Thank you. All right, let's see what we have. We've got, all right, so on YouTube, we've got, Kenny says, can my asylum case be affected if I claim TPS and obtain an EAD based on TPS? Thanks for the question. I appreciate it. So here's the question. Will applying for or getting TPS and the work permit that can come along with that, will that negatively affect a pending asylum case? The answer, thankfully, is no, absolutely not. Those two things really don't have anything to do with each other. Applying for and getting TPS will not affect your asylum case, neither positively or negatively. Okay. It can have an impact if you get granted TPS and therefore you have legal status through TPS. At the moment that you get a negative asylum decision, if you get that from the asylum office, they won't put you in deportation proceedings. They will just deny your case because you have legal status through TPS. But it will not affect whether you actually win or lose your asylum case. So I encourage you to apply for TPS. If you're from a country whose nationals are eligible to apply and you meet the requirements, you should apply for TPS, even though you have a pending asylum case. Okay. It can only help, right? TPS offers you protection against deportation and a work permit. And you might be thinking, you know what? I've got my asylum case pending. I'm going to win asylum. Why would I need this TPS thing? Asylum is going to basically be permanent, going to lead to permanent residence or a green card. TPS is just temporary. It's not so good. I don't want to mess with it. That's not the best way to look at this. You should pursue every means available to you to get long-term status in the United States. Okay. And this is one of them. Okay. TPS, it can be a long-term thing that's going to keep you from being deported. Okay. Also, your work permit based on your pending asylum case could go away. If your case gets denied by USCIS, and you have legal status based on whatever, at that time, your case goes away. If your case is in immigration court and it gets dismissed, then your asylum case disappears and you cannot renew your work permit based on a pending asylum case because you don't have a pending asylum case anymore. It's gone. So if you have a work permit based on TPS, you'll be able to keep working without any problems. You can have both work permits based on asylum pending and based on TPS at the same time. There's no prohibition on that. It's perfectly fine. And I encourage you to do it. I think you should both, apply, keep your work permit and apply for renewals based on asylum pending, but also when you're eligible for TPS, apply for the work permit based on that too. You can have both at the same time. Okay. Kenny says, thank you for your expertise and for sharing. My pleasure. You're welcome. Thank you for the question. All right. Good question. Assignment Angel says, as an asylum officer, did you ever receive any applicants' social media reports from USCIS before their asylum interview? Thank you for the question. So the question is whether an asylum officer is going to know about your social media activities. So when I was an asylum officer with the government, with USCIS, yes, we did sometimes check out people's social media. And they're limited to what's public, right? So if you have your Facebook feed, let's say public, then they can just search your name, find you, and see what's on your Facebook wall. However, they have gone a step further. Normal asylum officers don't do this, but there's a special fraud detection unit within USCIS that does this, where and ICE has this too, where they basically create fake accounts and befriend you for the purpose of trying to get more of your social media info. So, and there may be other tactics they're using too that haven't been reported on. The bottom line, though, is that you should assume that, anything that's public, there's a chance they will know about it. Not for sure. In fact, the chances are probably not that high, but they might see something. So if it's problematic, lock it down. Don't share your social media with anyone who's not like your friend, or and don't put anything out there to the world that you don't think an asylum officer should see. Okay. I should also note that sometimes these things can be taken out of context. Like for example, one time when I was an asylum officer, I remember there was this case that my colleague had where the applicant had like a hat on that is sometimes associated with a gang, like a Central American gang that has people in the US as well. They wear the clothing of this particular sports team, and the person had this on. And after I saw the whole sort of investigation into it and how it shaped out, I was convinced 100% that it had nothing to do with gang activity. The person just was really a fan of this team. They did a good job of convincing us of that, or convincing me anyway. So, but the point is, it can cause problems, even if it's not actually something that should be considered problematic. It can be considered problematic because, remember, USCIS sees fraud everywhere. Okay, they see fraud and danger under every rock, even when they shouldn't. When there is none. So you should go into it assuming that they're gonna probably, there's a chance they will know about your social media activities. Okay. I'll take your follow-up question too. It says, does having a prominent law firm and humanitarian organization such as Human Rights First representing an applicant increase her asylum chances or have a positive impact? Please explain. Thanks for the question. So the question is whether having a prominent law firm representing you or getting support from a well-known human rights organization, in this example, it was Human Rights Watch, will that help you win your asylum case? Well, first of all, with regard to the law firm, it can make a difference. When I was an asylum officer, there was discussion about law firms and attorneys, and they get reputations, right? Some of them get reputations as bad, shady, unscrupulous lawyers that can't be trusted. And that can affect your case. On the other hand, there's some that have good reputations. Some lawyers and law firms, when an asylum officer sees their work and sees they're representing a client, I think that they do tend to give them the benefit of the doubt if they're viewed as serious, credible people who don't try to do shady things and who do a good job in helping explain and present the case and giving the officer the information they need to really understand the case and framing it in a way that makes it easy to understand the case, then I think that definitely helps the case. Now, with regard to the second point on having some kind of organization supporting you, I've never seen Human Rights Watch or any organization like that like support someone in an asylum claim. But if they ever reported on something that involves you specifically or some group you're involved with, then yeah, I mean that would definitely be helpful. Thanks for the question. All right. All right. So Shiraz Arif says on YouTube, so if Trump comes in, are you still going to get asylum cases, or Muslims can get asylum? Thanks for the question. So the question is, if Trump becomes president, what's going to happen to asylum cases? Is it going to be possible to get asylum? And specifically, you asked about the impact on Muslims seeking asylum. It would take a lot for people to just not be able to get asylum, or for there to be a Muslim asylum ban. I don't think it's going to happen. I think that Trump can do things to make it harder in general to get asylum, but it would take an act of Congress, like a change in the laws, to just like basically get rid of asylum, or to make it impossible for Muslims to get asylum, or for any group to get asylum. I will say on the second part, though, on this question of will it be harder for Muslims in particular to get asylum? Yeah, it's not going to make it like impossible, but just by the culture that gets instilled at the asylum offices and in the immigration courts, that kind of comes from up above, from higher up in the government, that makes a difference. And there already is anti-Muslim discrimination and bias, I think, both of the asylum office and an immigration court. And I think that there's a chance that, that only gets heightened and intensified, if Trump comes back, for what I think are obvious reasons. All right. Imre says, thank you, bro. You're welcome. All right. So the question we've got for Imre says, what's the approval rate for immigration courts for Kurdish people from Turkey? Do you have any idea? No, I don't know. That statistic is not kept. Okay. I would say just the mere fact that someone is a Kurd from Turkey, or a Turkish Kurd, by itself is not enough to get you asylum. But if you've had problems because of it, or you've been threatened because of it, and the facts of your particular case suggest that you're at risk because of like who you are, because of your background, your ethnic origin, or your religion, or the way that you practice your religion, then then it could be a viable claim. But it's something that you really need to like talk about with an asylum lawyer in detail. Okay. Oh, interesting. Assignment Angel says, how to effectively present threat screenshots from social media to an asylum officer in Houston. That's where I was an asylum officer in Houston, so I know that, and that's where my law firm is based. So I know that office well. So the question is, how do you present to the asylum officer threats that you've received via social media? Well, you print them out. I mean, you can take a screenshot and then print that screenshot out and submit it as evidence. Remember, if it's in a foreign language, you'll need to have a certified translation into English. If you applied for asylum online with USCIS, then you would like take the PDF version of that and upload it. But you also, in my opinion, it's best to like index it with in the same way that you do other evidence, or that you should, in my opinion, index other evidence, which is to say there's an index where it says, like, on page 13, photo or screenshot of, of threatening message on WhatsApp on so-and-so date, where person said they were going to kill me because I'm a filthy dog who practices the wrong religion. Basically like a one sentence description of what it is, like when it occurred, what platform it's on, and what it says, or what the most important thing about it is. And then that page number that it references should like correspond to the paginated pages in the submission, in like the filing that you're making of evidence. You don't have to do all that, but it's better if you package your submissions to the asylum office or the immigration court neatly in a way that makes it very easy to work through them and easy for the decision maker to see what is what and to like move between different things in it. you're going to make their life easier. Okay. And this is an important point, that you want to make the asylum officer or judge's life as easy as possible. Okay. You want to give them a roadmap for how to get to the answer yes in your case in the easiest way possible. All right. And we do this through what's called a supplemental filing, where we're going to submit to the asylum office a packet that gives the officer everything they need to see that you qualify for asylum. Okay. It's going to consist of a few things. It's going to consist of a declaration or personal statement from your perspective that we're going to develop together, where you're telling your story. All right. And you're doing this in a very particular way. Most people don't do a good job with this. Even most lawyers don't do a good job with helping their clients do this. Usually it's just long and rambling and has lots of extraneous information that does not help the asylum case. All right. It's got to be concise. It's got to be on point. It's got to be including only stuff that's relevant, that shows the officer the things they need to see to know that you qualify for asylum. That's the first thing. The second thing is evidence. All right. You're going to want to include evidence that backs up what you're saying. And we make a list for our clients of the evidence we think they should try to get, and they try to get as much as they can. And then third, we write a legal brief where we explain exactly why our client qualifies for asylum. And I do that based on my experience as a former asylum officer, in terms of the way that it's laid out, and even the language that's used. I want to do it in a way that is almost the same as the assessment that the asylum officer has to write after they do the interview. Because you see, after every interview, the officer has to write what's called an assessment, where they have to explain, okay, here's the facts of this case. Here's my decision, and here's like my reasoning or how I got to my decision. And there's a template, a set format they have to use every time when they do this. Well, now as an asylum lawyer, I use basically the same template when I write my legal brief. I want to write the officer's assessment for them. Okay. I want them to literally be able to copy stuff from my legal brief and paste it into the assessment that they have to write. Because you see, one of our goals in working together is to make the officer's life as easy as possible. We want to give them a roadmap for how to get to the answer yes in your case in the easiest way possible. And this supplemental filing and ensuring that it's thorough, but succinct and extremely well organized to be impactful. This is a major part of setting the stage for your case. The idea here is that when you walk into your asylum interview, we want the officer to be already thinking, okay, based on the documents in this case, I can already see how they meet all the requirements for asylum. Now, as long as they just show up at the interview and say things that line up with what's in the documents, well, then yeah, I plan to give them asylum. Okay, that's what we want to create in the officer's mind before the interview. All right. Thank you for the question. All right. All right. Good questions. Thank you. Oh, nice. That's funny. Thank you for that, Amir. Okay. So it was carried through asylum. Okay, that's interesting. Thanks for that. This is interesting. Okay. As a former asylum officer, what questions did you use to ask a gay asylum seeker? In what way did they prove that they're gay? Thanks for the question. So the question is, for someone who's a member of the LGBTQ plus community, what kind of questions are you going to get, and how do you prove that you're gay? And yes, you're right. You do have to prove that you're gay, which I know sounds ridiculous and it's like offensive, but it's true. Like, you have to convince the officer that yes, you are in fact gay, if that's what your case is based on, right? And you can imagine that people do lie about this sometimes, right? Because they know that, oh, if I'm from a country where, gay people, members of this community, are widely persecuted, then I'll probably get asylum if I just convince the officer that I'm gay. So there is a lot of fraud around this. So they do have to ask a lot of questions and really be convinced. So how do you do that? First of all, go to asylumquestions.com. Okay, just type in asylumquestions.com, and you're going to get access to this free training where I have 400 and something questions that you can expect to be asked at your asylum interview. And there's a section in there that's just about LGBTQ plus cases. So those are the questions you're going to be asked. Basically, you're going to be asked to tell sort of your story, your evolution of your sexual identity, It's not just, hey, do you have a partner? Or, have you had sexual contact with someone of the same sex as you? You probably will get those questions, but really more importantly, they want to know that you can talk about your case in the way that someone who has lived this experience over time would be able to talk about it, at least how they think someone like that should be able to talk about it. So like they're going to ask you a lot about the early days of like, when did you realize that maybe you were sort of different than most people in this regard? What was that like? What happened? Who did you first tell about it? When was the first time that you had any kind of romantic relationship, and how did it develop? Like basically questions like that are sort of more background about your own experiences in sort of evolving and going through the different sort of experiences that someone in this position probably has gone through. They want to hear you talk fluently about this. Okay. So, but yeah, go to asylumquestions.com and you can get this long, deep, very detailed training about what kind of questions you're going to get at your asylum interview. Okay. Thanks for the question. What about Pakistan? Thanks for the question. So the question is, can you get asylum as someone from Pakistan? It totally depends. Like there's no way that I can tell you, yes, you'll win just because you're from Pakistan. It's not like that. You won't win just because you're from Pakistan. But I can tell you that, yeah, because there's certain issues and problems in Pakistan, that we do see a fair number of successful applicants from Pakistan. So it's going to come down though to your individual circumstances. What's happened to you? What has happened? And why do you fear that you'd be harmed in the future? And how likely is it that you're going to be harmed? And if so, if you are harmed, what would the reason for that be? Right? Because remember, it's got to be motivated. The persecution has to be motivated, at least in significant part, by the fact that you possess one of the 5 protected grounds under U.S. asylum law: your race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or something called membership in a particular social group. Okay, so it's the kind of thing that we'd have to discuss in detail. Like I can't just say, oh yeah, Pakistan, sure, asylum, or Pakistan, nope, no asylum. All right, you can get asylum even from countries that are considered to be very developed, or even progressive and safe, including from like Scandinavia in Europe, which is generally considered to be like the most democratic region in the world. Cases have been won from people from those places. Okay. So it's harder, obviously. Obviously, the approval rates for Canadians is going to be lower than the approval rate for Syrians, but it's not necessarily impossible. It depends on the facts of your case. So that's something you should talk with an asylum lawyer about. Okay. All right. Let's see. Thank you. All right. So Leo says, I filed an asylum case 7 years ago. I made an expedite request. It's been denied. They send my letter to the address, which was my first address, which is the other jurisdiction than my current address. Okay. So there's two issues here. Thanks for the question. There's 2 issues. You filed it 7 years ago, and they denied your expedite request. So what do you do? Thanks. So the question is, what can you do if you applied for asylum a long time ago, in this case, 7 years ago, and you still have not had your asylum interview with USCIS, and you requested that it be expedited? You asked them, hey, can you speed this up? I presume that you did that on what they call urgent humanitarian grounds. Like that's the only reason they'll expedite. They won't just say, yeah, we'll bump you up in line. We'll speed you up for like no reason. You have to give them a good reason to show that there are humanitarian reasons why your case should be sped up. And so you did this, you asked, and they said no. What can you do? You should sue the government. You should sue the government in what's called a mandamus lawsuit, where you ask a federal judge to tell the asylum office you have to give them their interview. They've been waiting too long. The government's supposed to act in a reasonable time on any immigration application. And when they don't do that, you can sue them. So the question then is, okay, well, what's reasonable? In this context of waiting for an asylum interview, I think that anything beyond 3 years starts to become unreasonable. And beyond 3 years, you're in a pretty decent position to apply pressure and get your interview by suing the government. We love doing this. I love suing the government. We have had great success with this. And so I hope you'll call us and talk about this, about how we might be able to help you with getting your interview by suing the government. They call this a mandamus lawsuit. And if you look down below our numbers at the bottom of the screen, It's also above my head. So give us a call and we can set up a time to talk about this, about how we can help you to secure your future in America through asylum by forcing an asylum interview. First things first, you got to get your interview before you can win, right? So let's do that in a mandamus lawsuit. That's what you should do. Now, I get this question all the time of, will the fact that I've sued the government to get my asylum interview, is that going to hurt my asylum case? Like, is it going to be looked at negatively when it's time for me to go have my asylum interview? Is the officer going to hold it against me, the fact that I dared to sue the government? And I get this concern. It makes total sense. I can understand where this comes from. But the answer is no, it's not going to hurt your case. I am fully confident that it will not hurt our clients' cases. Okay. First of all, I think the officer won't know that you've sued. When I was an asylum officer, we didn't know that someone had sued or threatened to sue. That information just didn't go in the case file. Second, even if they do know, I don't think they're going to hold it against you. Okay. It's understandable that someone who's been waiting for years for an asylum interview would take action to assert their right. Because again, you have a right to have your case adjudicated, to have it handled in a reasonable time. Okay. And if you've been waiting for many years, it's not reasonable, so it's understandable. So no, I don't think that suing the government to get your interview is going to hurt your underlying asylum case at all, okay? All right, thank you for that. This is a good question. So after waiting for 3+ years to get an asylum interview in the conservative X state, if the applicant moves to liberal Y state, can they still do a mandamus lawsuit in the new state to get the interview? Thanks for the question. So the question is, if you move from one place to another and you change asylum offices because you moved, can you do a mandamus lawsuit right away? Or is the time that you've been waiting in that old jurisdiction of the old asylum office, does it not count for purposes of trying to wait for a few years before you do a lawsuit to try to force your interview? The answer is you can do the mandamus right away. Let's say you live in Texas for 5 years and then you move to California and your case is transferred from the Houston asylum office to the San Francisco asylum office. Do you have to wait more time at San Francisco because you haven't been waiting there for very long, or can you go ahead and sue based on the fact that you've already waited for 5 years, even though it was back in with another asylum office? Thankfully, you can sue right away. The judge is going to look at the whole time that your case has been pending with USCIS, not in what specific office it's been pending in. We've had this scenario happen. We've had this almost exact same fact pattern, and we've sued and it's been fine, where the government doesn't come back with the argument that like, oh no, you've only been waiting at this asylum office for 3 months and that's not unreasonable. No, it's from the time that you filed. It's not the job of any particular asylum office to take action on your case. It's the job of USCIS. And the fact that you moved doesn't change that. Okay. So I hope that helps. And call us if you want to talk about suing the government. We love doing that. All right. Thanks for the question. King Nuri says, how many times can I change my immigration court venue? I already had my case in Connecticut immigration court and transferred to Houston, and it seems like it's almost impossible to win here. Thank you for the question. So the question is, can you keep changing the jurisdiction of your asylum case in immigration court? Like, can you keep changing courts? Well, it sounds like from the question that you can only usually get this done, this transfer to happen if you actually move, right? And when you move, you have to ask the judge wherever your case was pending in the past. You have to say, hey, I've moved, and here's the form that shows, I did the change of address notification to the court. I've moved. Would you please transfer my case to the court near where I live now, my new address? And usually they say yes, at least the first time, often the second time, but sometimes even the second time, or more likely the third or fourth time, they might eventually say no. They might be like, no, it looks like you're just trying to stall. It looks like you're just trying to either stall or you just are doing what's called venue shopping, where you're trying to go to a more favorable location, like a more liberal state with a higher approval rate, like in California or New York. So the answer is there's no set number. There's no like hard number that's like, oh, you can change it only 2 times or only 4 times. There's no rule like that. It's up to the judge where your case is pending to decide whether they agree to say, okay, yes, I will release your case and move it over to your new place. And sometimes they say no, especially if it's happened one or two times. Like if you've only done it one time, there's a pretty decent chance that you can get it moved if you ask for it to be moved one more time. Especially if a lot of time has passed, since it was moved previously. If it's been like a year or 2 or 3 or 4 years, if it's real quick succession, like 3 moves requests in 1 year, it's more likely that they're going to say no. But there's no hard and fast rule, and there's no harm in asking. Honestly, like it's not going to hurt you to ask. It's not going to negatively affect your asylum case because you asked and were denied the transfer. There's no harm in asking. Thanks for the question. So Eb Amar says, sorry for the mispronunciation on Facebook, says, hey, I applied in 2015, but I've still not gotten any update. So the question is, what can you do if you applied 8 years ago for asylum with USCIS and you still haven't gotten your asylum interview? You should sue the government in what's called a mandamus lawsuit to force them to take action in your case. All right. We tell people that like 3 years, if you've been waiting 3 years since you applied, that you're in a pretty good position to force your interview through this lawsuit. You've been waiting 8 years. There's a very high chance for success with you bringing this lawsuit. What happens is when you sue, the government lawyers have 60 days to respond and like tell the judge what their position is with regard to the case. And very often during that time, usually near the end of those 60 days, they come back and they call the lawyer, send an email and say, hey, we don't really want to fight this one. Will your client will they drop the lawsuit, withdraw it if we give them the interview? And that's how you get your interview. These cases settle. Like they don't usually get, the mandamus lawsuits don't really get usually fought to the bitter end in immigration court. Usually they settle because the government says, we don't want to fight this. We'll give you your interview and then we'll make sure you get your decision fairly soon thereafter. And then the litigant, the person who sued, will agree to drop the lawsuit. 8 years, yeah, there's a very good chance for success in your case, I would say. All right. So call us if you want to talk about it. All right. 713-909-0401. Or you can go to winasylum.com. It's WINASYLUM.com, winasylum.com, to schedule a consultation. Right now, we're offering free consultations. We used to charge. Right now, at the moment that I'm making this live, they're free. So take advantage of this and schedule a free consultation with us so that you can talk with one of our asylum professionals and we can see whether we might be able to help you win your case. And, if you've been waiting for a long time, we can talk about possibly suing the government to get your interview. Okay. Okay. So on YouTube, we've got a question that says, I've been out of status for, they said in another comment that they were on F1. Okay. So I've been out of status for more than 180 days. I came on an F1 visa. My visa expired. What are the options for me? You're probably, if you've been out of status for 180 days, you're not going to get asylum. Let me start over. So the question is, what happens to a student who comes here on an F1 visa and then loses their status and they're out of status for like a long time? In this case of the question, 6 months, 180 days. Can you still apply for asylum? You're probably going to have a problem with the 1-year filing deadline. It's true that while you maintained your F1 status, even if that was for like 3, 5, 10 years, you would still be able to get around the 1-year filing deadline by maintaining that status if you file while you still have that status. But in your case, in the question, you lost your status 6 months ago, your student status. Then the question becomes whether the application for asylum was filed within a reasonable time after the status ended. So if you applied a week after your status ended for asylum, even if that was like 6 years after you entered the country, you would be okay with regard to the 1-year filing deadline because you would have applied within a reasonable time after your extraordinary circumstance of maintenance of status ended. But if you get to like 2 or 3 months after your status ends, it starts to become not very reasonable. 6 months, it's very likely going to be deemed unreasonable. They're going to be like, you should have applied much sooner than this. Not for sure, though. Not 100% sure. They're supposed to take into account all relevant factors of like why it took you so long to file, why it took you so long after losing your status. So if you were depressed, you were clinically depressed, you were in the hospital part of that time, and you couldn't hardly function, or something like that, then that 6 months could be reasonable. It does come down to a case by case analysis of your particular circumstances. So I can't rule it out and say, oh no, you are out of luck. You're not going to win because of the 1 year filing deadline. But I can tell you that it's going to be tough. All right. Let's see. Is it true? All right, good question. Is it true that asylum officers asked to check an interviewee's phone? Is it wise not to carry the cell phone to the asylum interview? Thanks for the question. So the question is, at your asylum interview, is the asylum officer likely to ask you to see your cell phone? And the answer is, I would say it's not likely, but it's possible. And the follow-up question was, okay, if that's the case, if it might happen, then is it a good idea to just not take your cell phone to the interview? And I guess that sort of presupposes that you have something on there that you don't want them to see. When I was an asylum officer, I never asked anyone to see their cell phone. But it does happen. They're allowed to ask you that. It doesn't happen often. Like now as an asylum lawyer, I don't think it's ever happened actually, honestly, to any of our clients. But it could happen. It does sometimes happen. And so it could happen. So if there's something that you really don't want them to see on your phone, then yeah, I guess a strategy would be to not take it. I hope that there's not things on your phone that are, I hope that you are an open book, so to speak, and that, you don't have anything to hide. But I mean, yeah, I guess if you don't want them to see something on your phone, then yeah, you could just not take your phone. So, I'll tell you that one time someone offered to show me on their phone video that they had, and it made a big impact on me. It was this guy from Venezuela, and it wasn't like anything gruesome it wasn't gruesome, but it was still very impactful. He took it from his cell phone of these people that were like on his balcony, like his patio, trying to get into his house, like banging on the house, on the gates and stuff, and like around the house, trying to like get into the house and like screaming. And they had these like masks on, and it was scary. And they had guns. And just seeing that, it like moved me. It was like, it made a big impact on me. In a way that made me more sympathetic to his case and made me want to give him asylum even more, which I did. So the point is, you may be able to use some of these things to your advantage. But yeah, to go back to your question, yeah, they can ask to see it. And if you say no, they will hold it against you, if only sort of, subconsciously, or even if it's not like a formal, like, oh, they refuse to give over their cell phone, therefore that's 3 points deducted. Like, it's not like that, but it will probably negatively affect their impression of your case. Okay. All right. So nice. Okay. That's interesting. Thanks for that. All right. That's it for today. Thank you for being with me on the Asylum Answers show. Again, I'm Brian Manning, and my law firm is based in Texas, but we help people all over the country. We've got clients in California, New York, lots in Florida, up in Chicago. So it doesn't matter where you live. We might be able to help you. If you've got a case with USCIS or an immigration court, we help people in both of those settings, whether you've already applied and now you want to strengthen your case and be as prepared as possible, or you're just thinking about applying, or you've decided you want to apply, but you haven't done it yet. In all those scenarios, we help people to make good decisions and then to present the strongest asylum case possible. So give us a call. Now, that number is above my head. Or you can go to winasylum.com to schedule a consultation. Again, right now we're offering free consultations. So take advantage of that while it lasts. and we hope to speak with you very soon. Again, I'm Brian, and it's really a pleasure and honor to support you in your asylum journey. So thanks, and I'll see all of you